Welcome to Coffee and History, a conversation with Alabama heritage. We are your hosts. I'm Rebecca Mender,
Susan Reynolds,
and Caroline Gazera McKenzie.
Join us as we sit down with some of the most fascinating figures in the state of Alabama over a hot or cold cup of coffee. We'll explore the captivating tales of Alabama, stories that educate, inspire, and hopefully entertain. We're thrilled to have you here with us. Today, we have taken our podcast on the road and we're recording from the beautiful and historic Scott Yarborough House, also known as Pebble Hill in Auburn, Alabama. This home serves as the location of the Caroline Marshall Drawn Center for the Arts and the Humanities. And we thank its director, Mark Wilson, for allowing us to visit for a few days and interview some of the great people from this part of the state. So, ladies, before we introduce our guests, we'd like to call this our Did You Know segment. And some of these come directly from the Encyclopedia of Alabama. If you've never used that online resource, I highly recommend it. So we're going to share a surprising fact about the state of Alabama that might be new information to our listeners, but it could be new information for us as well. Today, I wanted to ask, did you know that Alabama Public Television was the first educational TV network in the United States?
No.
Really?
Yeah, it was actually established in 1953, and that was 16 years before PBS was created. So APT's first on-air content was the inauguration of Governor Jim Folsom, and also some taped materials that Auburn University created, as well as the University of Alabama and the Jefferson County Schools. So that was, kind of interesting educational material that they had at the very beginning.
Yes, and we really love APT. And thanks to APT and its affiliation with PBS, I had the best childhood because I loved Reading Rainbow.
Oh, and don't forget the electric company too, because that was pretty awesome.
Awesome.
I had no idea. I mean, because we watched PBS programming that's aired on APT, and so I just assumed that PBS came first, but no, it didn't.
That's amazing.
We made history.
Alabama Public Television was there 16 years in advance. So there you go.
Well,
that's our fun fact for the day.
Well, today's guest is probably a little too young to remember some of those shows, like myself, but also has a vision of documentaries and education. Theo Moore II founded Hiztorical Vision Productions in 2017 to educate the public on the untold, inspiring history of African Americans in the South. He is from Anniston, Alabama, and earned a bachelor's in history and a master's in post-secondary education history at Troy University. Please welcome Theo Moore.
Woo! All right, Theo.
We're glad to have you here.
Yeah, welcome to our show.
Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Of course, we're so happy to have you. So let's kick this off with, how did you go about from studying history to documenting history?
Well, if you had to throw me in a box, I am a historian educator first.
Nice.
And so it started with teaching. So as you said, my scholarship, my academic career, I was actually equipping myself to be an educator. Mm-hmm. A professor on the collegiate level on the subject of history. But as I was teaching, I got in the teaching field, and as I was teaching, the students wasn't getting the opportunity to learn about the tangible history right in our state. And so, the kids are now in technology. Mm-hmm. And so I had an epiphany and I'm the type of educator to meet people where they are.
Right.
And so everything's going to technology. And so if I wrote a book or anything, which I still want to do, I was very concerned about access. Like, who would get this information that I'm writing in the book?
Right.
I was concerned that it may be helping prop up a door or something.
Right.
Or be part of the decoration. Mm-hmm. And so I just had an epiphany to turn my scholarship into small, short films that's easy and digestible on social media. Keep them short, sweet, to the point, because, people's attention span is like, don't
we
want to go
understand.
overboard. Mm-hmm. And so that's how Hiztorical Vision Productions was born. And I chose to be a nonprofit because on top of doing these stories, I understand that these communities need more than just a documentary.
Yeah, right.
They need access to resources and things of that nature. So whenever we do decide to do a project, we spend a lot of time with the community and and sharing our resources with them so they can get the help that they need.
Well, we completely understand what you're talking about, finding people where they are, because that's one of the reasons why we started this podcast. We have a history magazine for our listeners who don't know. Alabama Heritage is a quarterly publication, and there's only so much that you can put in an article from like 3,000 to 5,000 words, as you know, because you've written for us as well. And there's a lot more stories to be told beyond the printed word. And I feel like, having some type of way to document those stories, whether it's, visually the way you do or through a podcast like we are now doing. And it's just great because then you can document that history, but then find people where they are. And we are much more visual people these days. We're always on our phones or our iPads or, tablets, computers, some type of technology. And if you can create small snippets where people can engage, then that will lead them. So it's almost like leading a horse to water, because it's like, but you are forcing them to drink, because they actually will take those small snippets, if it's like an Instagram reel or something, and then they engage in that, they're going to want more. And then you can bring them to a long form, film that you're creating. And then that way they're more engaged there. And so we're trying to do the same thing with this podcast, is if we can grab readers and listeners and viewers and then get them interested in some of the stories we're telling, they might be interested in reading about it in our magazine. And then when you finally do publish your book, then people will start reading your book.
Because you're a great writer. Well, I know that you have several award-winning films, and you've also been nominated for an NAACP Image Award. Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Congratulations on that.
We're so proud.
Yes. Yes, for your PBS series In the Margins. And for our listeners, we are recording this before the Image Awards are announced. So we'll have to let you know in the comments if Theo wins. And we're really rooting for him. So Theo, tell us about the series In the Margins and the process involved in creating these documentaries that you do and all of that good stuff.
Yes. So everything started from this, the opportunity that PBS presented to early career filmmakers. PBS had the inaugural cohort of diverse voices, supporting people from different backgrounds, highlighting, giving good content. And so I was selected out of probably like 1,800 applicants.
That's so great.
Yeah. Wow.
And a lot,
and we're sitting next to you.
I know.
I know. It's crazy.
It's like, you're a little famous now.
You're very famous now.
So all of my cohorts are like from New York, California, Chicago, doing amazing things. And then you have this little dot from Alabama, because they showed us a map of where everybody was from. And then you have the little small dot from Alabama. So
greatness knows no borders.
Yeah,
right.
exactly.
That's true.
And so from that cohort, it just gave us access to so many people, like executive directors and big time people in the industry. We had workshops and things of that nature, and that led to APT, like meeting APT at the PBS annual meeting. We actually met for a minute, Heather, and met with Chris Holmes from APT, and it was like, okay. We've noticed your work already, but let's try to get something going. And so PBS, I love PBS. I think
right. We all do.
So it's just a perfect fit. So PBS Digital Studios have, of course, PBS have their TV broadcasting, but they also have a YouTube series, like so public PBS Digital Studios. They put out small shorts for YouTube and things of that nature. And so they put out a request for a proposal. Like, hey, we want to do something about untold history and things of that nature. And so APT got the request for the proposal. As soon as they saw it, they thought of me. Said, hey,
That's great.
Yeah.
Theo, like, you were just telling me about all this untold history.
This is meant for you.
If we could partner on this and get a good pitch to the PBS Digital Studios, and I was all for it. I have so many stories, just being in the community and stuff like that, where, we pitched and we got it, and we was able. It was a cohort. So this in the margins was a cohort of PBS member stations. So it was APT, a member station out of Utah, a member station out of Philadelphia, and there's another one that I'm missing. Sorry. I'm sorry. But so each member station was in charge of 4 episodes. So I produced and directed 4 episodes along with APT help and assistance, and because they did an amazing job writing. And then the editor at APT is awesome.
Yeah.
And so to bring all of this to light. And so it's been a journey, but it was awesome. Yeah. And that's how we came to do the stories. Should I talk about the stories?
Yeah.
Let's go for it.
So the first episode was Hobson City, Alabama. I actually did a documentary on it, but I was early in my filmmaking career, and I always say if I had the opportunity, I want to revisit this and do it the right way. And so the first episode with PBS I pitched was Hobson City. So we did a new version of it that was cool and digestible, and then we did one on Black banks. So we highlighted the Alabama Penny Savings Bank in Birmingham, but talked about Black wealth.
Right.
The early introduction to Black wealth in the country. And then we did one on Tuskegee VA Hospital.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
The first and only Black ran VA Hospital. And there was a lot of history behind that because it sits on Tuskegee. It's still open to this day. And it was an amazing story of how that came about on Tuskegee University campus. And so that was an awesome one.
Yeah.
And then the last one was I always want to talk about indigenous people here in the South. And so I'm very close to a friend that's part of the MOWA band, the Choctaw Indians in Mount Vernon, Alabama. And, we got that done. And, the tribe, was very welcoming to this opportunity. And so, those are the 4 episodes, and each episode is over 100K views.
Amazing.
So
I love it.
That's amazing.
It's pretty dope.
Yeah, that's amazing.
I
love that so much.
So that goes to show you that the South has a lot of content.
We do.
Opportunity of content that can engage with the nation. Honestly.
When you're not doing these for PBS, how are you able to create? Do you apply for grants, or do you have people who just approach you and say, we want to do this and we'd like to hire you to do that? I mean, how are you able to produce the films that you've been working on up until PBS?
Well, say that question again. I'm sorry.
So how do you get your funding to be able to do some of your films? Because like with PBS, obviously they're going to help you create, but how are you able to produce those outside of that type of funding?
Gotcha. So Hiztorical Vision Productions being a nonprofit, we qualify for a lot of things pertaining to the arts.
Okay.
And so Alabama State Council on the Arts help us a lot with our projects. We just received a grant from Alabama Humanities Alliance. So,
nice.
Congratulations.
So, thank you. And so that's actually supporting upcoming film that should be dropping this year on Prattville Civil Rights History. Pretty cool. Pretty cool.
Great.
That's how we usually get our grants. And of course, we get support from donors and things of that nature. But grants is really keeping us afloat. But also, what I'm excited about as well is that we're starting an online shop.
Oh, yes.
Because a lot of people like our logo.
Yeah. I love your logo.
Shirts.
Yeah.
And so we had to get some training in how to go about
merch.
get some merch and how does that work, and packaging and all that good stuff. So we're taking it slow, but we're going to be launching that this year as well to support our mission of filmmaking.
Right.
And hopefully
I will be buying it.
Yes.
Everybody loves swag. Yes.
We're doing a pre-sale, so I'll send it out to you.
So what is your website? We'll go ahead and drop that down. What is your website?
Yeah, it's www.historicalvp.org, and we spell historical with a Z.
Yes.
HIZTORICAL VP.
Okay, perfect.
Nice.
You know, you also worked with PBS, the Public Broadcasting System, when you were selected as a mentee for the PBS Ignite mentorship for Diverse Voices program. And honestly, this was the first time I had heard of that program. So what was that like to be a mentee, and what is that program actually about? And what did you have to do?
Yeah, I mentioned it a little bit, but I can go into detail that it was... So they selected this cohort of amazing, early filmmakers that highlight different untold, supporting underrepresented communities. So indigenous filmmaker, Black filmmaker, LGBTQ plus filmmakers and stuff like that. So it was a well-rounded group of people. And so we did virtual workshops, and PBS would introduce us to these filmmakers that have been in the game for a while, giving us the business side of filmmaking, learning so many things. Like, did you know that each film is its own LLC? It's its own
really?
business.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and so
That's so cool.
So whenever you actually develop a film, once you start gaining a lot of funding for it, you actually create your own LLC for that film. And so you start hiring a bookkeeper, you start hiring a casting director, you start hiring different people under that LLC.
Okay.
Yes. And then if there's a complaint or something, somebody want to sue you, you sue the LLC.
Yeah. That's smart.
Ain't nothing to do with me, type thing. And I was like,
That's a good idea.
so
Very smart.
I mean,
it was,
seems like
it was amazing.
I mean, if you're doing this by yourself, that would be really challenging. So it does seem like you have to have a big staff to be able to help support you,
And
to
supporting community.
to manage the LLC, to manage the business side, all that kind of stuff. I mean, how many people work with Historical Productions,
So
or is it just you?
So
That's a hard question,
the history of Historical Vision Productions is me and my wife.
Okay.
And so, of course, I'm the creative person, but she's the more quality assurance person.
Okay.
And that's a skill set. And so
for sure.
yes.
and so making sure we're in compliance, all the good stuff, as a nonprofit and all the good stuff. And so we kind of built it from there. Whenever you're starting something, somebody asked me something. When I first started the nonprofit, I asked somebody for a donation. And then they asked me, how much you donated? I was like,
My life.
my life. But,
Me, myself, and I donated me.
so right then and there, I knew that I would have to invest first.
Yeah.
Instead of, so, and so that first film project, I actually invested in that.
Right.
The Crown and County of Lowndes.
Yes.
Pretty rough around the edges, and I played each role, director, producer. I did everything for that. I was a one-man band. And then that particular project, caught some eyes to where when I did Hobson City, I was able to hire some production assistants, and in that particular project was able to support itself in a sense. So at this point, I still haven't paid myself.
Yeah.
Right.
And so Africa Town project was the first yes in regards to a grant.
Nice.
And so Alabama State Council on the Arts saw the other work that I was doing that I had to invest in first, and said, "We like what you're doing. Here's a little funding to help you with Africa Town." And so through that project, I was able to hire a second cameraman and stuff like that. And so now I hire a whole professional team.
That's great.
A whole professional team with the funding that we get. And so at first, I don't regret anything because now I know how to communicate with, the cameraman. Like, hey, I want it in the thirds. I want,
Right.
because
Because you're used to doing it
I'm
yourself.
used to doing it myself.
It's hard to pass it off.
Now I'm limited. I'm limited to a degree, but I can communicate with them my vision of what I
Right,
want
right.
and how I want it to look and all that good stuff. And so everything was just progress to this actual moment.
All balances out.
Theo, what are some of the challenges of documenting oral history?
There's a lot of challenges. I would say the biggest challenge, as it pertains to African American history, which I'm passionate about and educating other people about, because it's pretty cool. The things that we don't get the opportunity to learn about. But the most difficult thing is access to information. You know, like a lot of documentation, a lot of our history are still in grandma and granddad's house.
Exactly.
You know, it's not Alabama Department of Archives and History in your local library only have so much as it pertains to indigenous and African American history, because a lot of it is oral, a lot of it is pictures and documentation, stuff like that, which still sits in attics. And so you kind of become like a private eye, a detective. I kind of get a kick out of it because, I find myself in a lot of elderly people homes and stuff like that. And they offer you something to eat. Please don't. Please don't say no.
Yeah, exactly.
They'll be offended. Yes.
Yeah.
Old school people are offended. So like, I can eat again. I just ate lunch, but I sit here and go through the photo album with them and stuff like that.
It's funny because we had, I do a lot of work with the Tuscaloosa Civil Rights Foundation, and we were talking about Dr. King had come to First African Baptist Church, and no one really had a lot of information on it. And then finally, somebody said, I think Mr. Jenkins might have some photos of that, because I recall him being there. So we go to Mr. Jenkins' house, just like you're talking, and he's like, I've got this box in the garage, so I don't know what I've got. So we'll go take a look. So he literally walks us to the garage. He pulls down this, banker's box. So it's just a cardboard box. And we all know if you're going to keep photos, you want to protect them in a good way. Yeah. This was, in the elements, and it could have been completely destroyed or eaten by mouse. You never know. I mean, it's just, that's the worst way to document, keep documents is outside. But he pulled it down, and he had a manila folder, and there was this beautiful photo of Dr. King at the pulpit at First African Baptist Church. And, later we found out he had more. But it is one of those things where you're correct that, finding the material, because when we were starting out the Civil Rights Trail in Tuscaloosa, that was the hardest thing, was to find documentation, to find photographs, any video or anything like that. And I was just shocked that he had this in a manila folder, in a banker's box, in his garage.
That happens a lot. And
thanks, Mr. Jenkins.
Strategically, whenever I do a project, I actually go to church. Well, I spend a lot of time with the community. First of all, I go to church, I go to city hall meetings and stuff.
You want them to trust you.
Yeah. And so, and just, go to a fish fry. I haven't had one yet, but I'm throwing it out there for the next community.
Come to Tuscaloosa, we'll hook you up.
Okay. We got you.
But I strategically go to the church, first of all, to ask for a blessing. I think that's important when you're doing something for underrepresented communities. And then, I also do it because I know that's the people that have the good stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And so a lot of the elderly would come up to me after church, was like, you should come by the house.
Oh,
I got this picture, or, or whatever the case may be, because that's the people that have it.
Yeah.
And also seeing a young black male that's interested in their story is almost like a relief for them, in a sense. It's almost like, hey, here, my wife picked on me a lot. She said, I've never seen somebody with a lot of old people names in their phone.
Right.
So I have like Emma Jean and, Beatrice.
That's so sweet.
And so I have a lot of old people in my phone. They contact me a lot in regards to, wanting to tell their story and feel like this is the perfect platform to tell it. And so I don't take that lightly at all.
I think it's true, because a lot of times, younger people have not wanted to, they sit around the house and they hear their grandparents telling the stories, and it kind of goes in one ear and out the other, and they don't really pay attention. And I think sometimes, that's unfortunate, because younger generations aren't really that interested in history. And I have found also that sometimes the older generations don't want to talk about it, depending on what the subject matter is, because it could be something, very painful that, we lived through it. We don't need to talk about it anymore. But when you can get that perfect, strike of the match where, both sides really want, like the younger generation wants to hear and the older generation's ready to talk. That's, pretty dynamic. So whenever you can find that, that is fantastic. Because, I guess like what Caroline was, asking about having the challenges to documenting oral history, I think that could be one as well, besides just finding the artifacts, but having people willing to tell that story. Have you come across folks that are really like, yeah, I don't want to talk about any of that because that's an old story. Let's move on.
Yeah, I haven't ran into that yet.
Well, that's good.
Yeah, I haven't run into that yet.
That means you've established trust and a connection with these communities.
When I first come, I don't come with a camera.
Right. Yeah.
Like I don't.
Right.
Yeah. So
build that relationship.
I just spend a lot of time with them, and so I haven't ran into that issue. But I have to reel them back in sometimes because they want to get a lot off their chest, and they start cursing. I was like, hold on, this still an educational nonprofit now. We have to reel it back in.
Or they get off topic and they start
get
going.
Off topic, and so you have to reel them in, and so I haven't really ran into that issue just yet. Yeah.
Well, can you tell us a little bit more about your involvement in filming the Africatown community and working with them? Just
that's really been, the last
Yeah.
couple of years, that's really been such a hot topic for that community because there's been several books that have come out. There's been other documentaries that have been coming out about it. So, what was that like being with that community?
Yes. So I was with that community. I went to a couple of events and again, went to church, Union Baptist, and asked for a blessing, and everybody was for it. But again, there was a lot of people coming, but they was really drawn to me. One, because out of the filmmakers that was coming, I was the only Black person that was. And there was another guy, Frederick, that did another piece, but when I first came and talked to, some of the elders, they looked at me and was like, Theo, I know we just met, but, you better not come down here talking about this shit. Just like that, because a lot of people that was coming was more interested in that part of the story.
Clotilda is what you're referring to,
yes. I'm referring to the Clotilda.
Which was
ship.
just for our listeners, the Clotilda was the last documented ship that brought enslaved people to Alabama.
Yes, correct.
And it's buried somewhere in the waters down in the Mobile area, and a lot of people seem to have very strong opinions about whether we should, raise the ship or not. So
yes, it's still a debate about that. But it's still there. They have located the ship, and so it was a big story. But when I went down there, to the community, it just seemed like that's what everybody was interested in. And so when they told me that, like, Theo, you don't ask me nothing about that shit. I was like, okay, this is not what they want. And so in my film, I made sure that I spent time on the Clotilda, probably like I would say about 5 minutes, because it's like a 40-minute film. I spent like 5 to 10 minutes talking about the Clotilda because it's part of the story. Right. But I moved the story from the water and started talking about Cudjoe and how they developed their own Africa in North Mobile.
And Cudjoe is Cudjoe Lewis.
Cudjoe Lewis, correct.
He was actually, we've got photography and film of him as well. So he was like one of the last enslaved people that came over from that ship that we were able to document.
Yes, and so how they actually built the church, and from the church they built the school, and they just created their own community in North Mobile, and so that's what they was proud of, And so I made sure I did that, and talked about some of the other things that was happening to now. But they're so proud of that film because a lot of people are saying, "Oh man, thank you, man." Just watching this film over here, I would think that's all it is to the story. But they did so much afterwards. And so I'm very proud of it. And now that film is housed at the new museum.
Wow, that's great.
So that's pretty cool.
You know, I think that happens a lot with people get on a trend or a hot topic, right? And there's so much history that's missed.
Yeah.
If you just stay on that one topic, you're missing everything.
Yeah, because when you're focusing on the Clotilde ship, then
there's so much
like you
more.
said, I mean, you said it perfectly. I took it out of the water and brought it back to the land.
Yeah.
And that was so...
And the way she, Joycelyn Davis, the way she put it, she said, it's not about the ship, it's about the people on the ship.
Right. That's right.
And so that phrase right there let me know that, okay, let me tell this part of the story, but let me also celebrate the people that actually preserve the history. Because Lord Jesus, they did a wonderful job preserving that history. And, you talk to some of them, they still have that inconsistency of the English language. They still talk kind of, you can hear their ancestry when they're talking.
Amazing,
And so I was like, oh my God, that's so cool.
It is. That is really cool.
So how do you decide if a subject matter should simply be a short film as opposed to a full-length film?
Here's my phrase, meat and potatoes. And so what that means is basically what resources do I have access to help tell this story?
Right.
Is how I decipher if this should be a short or should this be like a full-length feature film or a biopic, type of thing. And so that's basically how I determine short film from, feature length. It's just the resources that you have available. Because it may be something that's pretty cool, but you don't have a lot of like tangible resources or tangible, like accurate, you may just be dependent on oral history and, with historical documentaries and just a filmmaker in general, people are trusting you with this information.
Exactly.
So I want to make sure that, I'm telling.
It's kind of the ultimate trust to give, your life story to someone because that's the most intimate history you have,
Yes.
and about your families too. So I guess, kind of a two-part question. How do you come up with your new ideas and what are you working on now?
How do I come up? So people usually come up to me and say, hey, did you know?
Word of mouth.
Chitlin circuit. Do you know what that is?
Yes.
Or, so I have a lot of people that approach me. Some stuff is just in the back of my head from my scholarship and just learning about these different things. And what I'm working on now is Prattville Civil Rights History.
Okay.
That story came about with me working at Alabama Historical Commission. And I actually helped that community preserve their church.
Okay.
And through my research of helping them preserve the church, I realized that this church had a lot of advocacy going on around it. Right across the street from that First Baptist Church in Prattville on 7th Street was this little duplex. And it was the Autauga County NAACP was housed there, and also the Autauga County Improvement Association and the Autauga County Voters Association.
Okay.
So there was this duplex.
Like a hub.
Yeah, it was a lot of. They was advocating for so much and wanted to highlight them and celebrate these unsung heroes that was part of that. But also, some things happened in '67 with Stokely Carmichael coming and all that type of stuff. But it's a good piece of history that I want to focus on, and it should be out this year. And then also I'm doing a project highlighting Tuskegee University, brought me on to tell the story of the Tuskegee Institute Advancement League.
Oh, what is that?
It was a student-led advocacy group in Tuskegee, and they actually supported other initiatives in different cities. So, if SNCC was doing something in Montgomery, Tuskegee Institute, well, they call them TILE for short.
Right.
TILE would support whatever's going on in Selma or Montgomery.
Well, Theo, we've enjoyed talking with you, but before you leave, we'd like to ask you a few more questions as part of our Before You Go segment, where we'll get to know you just a little bit better. You ready?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so who's someone you would like to meet most?
Yeah, I never got to meet my grandparents on my mom's side, so I would like to meet them. I have questions.
That could be dangerous.
What would you like to be known for?
I had this question. I think my wife asked it, like, what drives you, and it's just making an impact. You know, I'm impact driven. You know, is it money? Because she asked me, is it money or is it? No, I'm just impact driven. I get something out of the thank yous and the hugs of our elderly. You know, versus the NAACP Image Award. There will be a icing on the cake,
Right. Yeah.
but you know, those thank yous from our communities is
That's beautiful.
more than enough.
I like that.
Thank you. Well, we want to thank our guest, Theo Moore, for joining us today, and we thank you, our listeners and viewers, for joining us on this edition of Coffee and History, a conversation with Alabama Heritage. You can find our podcast on our website at alabamaheritage.com or wherever you listen to podcasts, and watch us on our YouTube channel where we post extended, unedited versions of this video. Next time, we will see you